What's up, YouTube? Fat Tony Gaming coming at you today with a friend of mine's deck profile for Tachikaze. This is Anthony. Tachikaze is one of his main clans that he plays, and he's got a little spicy brew that he wanted to share with everybody. So, Anthony, why don't you give us a little bit of an introduction?
Alright, like I said, name's Anthony. This is a very fun Tachikaze deck profile that's more Gaia based, mixed along with the new support that gave us access to more early game and resource gaining options, which I very much experimented with until I found a concrete build I was happy with. And I think you might appreciate it, what I'm going to be going with here. So, without further ado, let's get started. First, we're going to start off with the Forerunner here, which is Child Dragon, Little Tyranno. Some people might want to run the V-Era starter that gives you a free draw, which is nothing wrong with that, but I feel as though with this being an Excel clan, he generates a lot more resources than one might think. His skill is that when he's retired by your Vanguard with the Engorge ability, you can counterblast one and send him to Soul, and then you check the top 4 cards of your deck and Superior Call 2 from among them, and then put the other 2 at the bottom of your deck in any order. Now the key thing about this is if you ride your unit, which I'm going to show later with the Excel gift, and happen to call those into a circle, those are some pretty heavy beaters you get during a stride turn, which is very valuable for good rushing and forcing cards of the opponent's hand. Again, if you want to run Dragon Egg, that's completely up to you, but I feel as though this guy has a lot of merit to him. Now we're getting into the main grade 3 of the deck. Emperor Dragon, Gaia Emperor. He was the original G-Era boss introduced in Reckless Rampage, and he still has a lot of value even to this day. He has the Engorge ability, which the Engorge ability, in case you don't know, is when he attacks, you can retire any number of your rear guards, and when you do, they become the unit who ate them became engorged. While his GB2 skill is when he's engorged, he gets plus 5,000 and a critical. Again, solid ability, but you probably won't be seeing it very much often unless you really can't stride. But still, forcing criticals is forcing criticals. But the real meat here is his stride skill. When you stride, counterblast 1 and call up to 2 cards from your hand to the rearguard circles, and then you choose 2 units and give them the skill that when they're put into the drop zone, you can superior call them back to the rearguard circle. The key combo in this is all of your strides have the Engorge ability, which you eat them after when he attacks, that is, to revive them and get yourself set up for either trigger checks or potential combo plays with having your units eat each other. All in all, still a very great guy, and it's really good that he was reprinted so this deck doesn't cost you an arm and a leg to build.
Aside from the SPs.
True, but that's more for the flavor if you're going for it. Now, here is what you're supposed to ride if you're going first or your opponent's lagging behind. Tyrant Deathrex. He's the one with the Excel gift, and like I said, the one you want to ride if you're going first. He has a skill on Vanguard or Rearguard that when he attacks the Vanguard, you Soul Blast 1 and retire one of your units, and he gains 10,000 power for every equip gauge equipped to the unit that was retired, and then you get to choose one of the opponent's rear guards in the front row and retire it. He gives you access to early game retiring, which is really good, and while equip gauges aren't a big thing in this build, we do have one unit that uses them, and gaining a potential 10k to make him a 22 or 32 hitter if he's on an Excel circle is really good. Forcing cards out of hand and dealing with the opponent's troublesome units that don't have resist is really good. Plus, the Excel gift is what makes this deck be all the more aggressive. Next up, we have, for the Grade 2 lineup, Ravenous Dragon Megarex. Triple rare that was introduced in the V-Era. His skill is that when he attacks the Vanguard, you retire one of your units and then draw a card. Then if he's on the rear guard, when you activate this skill, you can counterblast 1 and put the top card of your deck to him as an equip gauge, and then he gets plus 5,000 for every equip gauge equipped to him. So the key thing about this is that he works on Vanguard or Rearguard, which combined with some of your grade 1s that benefit from being retired, can offer a lot of early game advantage and resource maintaining, so you're not minusing yourself too hard from hand from rushing in the early game, which is something Tachikaze is really good at doing now with all the new units it got from the V era. Now the next grade 2 on the list is kind of controversial within the Tachikaze community, but I happen to really like him. And that would happen to be Conflagration Dragon Gigant Flame. Gigant Flame has the Engorge skill. He also has a continuous effect that if you don't have a Gaia Vanguard or another Engorged unit, he can't attack the Vanguard. But he also has a GB1 continuous skill of, for every one of your other Engorged units, he gets plus 5,000. Now the caveat here is that he can't attack the Vanguard when he's not engorged. However, if you are fighting against another deck that likes to early game rush and decides to bring a bunch of rear guards on board, there is no restriction stopping you from attacking rear guards, which is very good because he has an 11k base to help defend against that very same early game rush. It kind of sucks if you do have to ride him and the opponent is playing around the matchup to not call too many things too early. But at the end of the day, still an 11k body, still does some really good work once you get into striding and hits for some pretty hefty numbers. Next up is Heavy Bullet Dragon Diablo Cannon. Diablo Cannon has the Engorge skill, a continuous effect of if you have a Gaia Vanguard, he gets plus 2k constantly during your turn. And then the auto skill, GB1, of discard a card from your hand. When this Engorged unit is retired, you pay the cost, and if you do, you call him to the rear guard, and he gets plus 5,000 until the end of the turn. With the amount of resource gaining this deck has now, the cost for this is very much a non-issue. On one of your stride turns, you can easily afford to ditch a card if it means either forcing more damage or forcing more cards out of the opponent's hand. Reviving in this way to hit for even higher numbers is definitely a benefit to the card's advantage. There are other grade 2s you could run, like Sarco Blaze as a sort of Silent Tom, but he would only see real more use in the early game when your opponent really doesn't want to discard too many grade 0s early on. Other than that, he doesn't really gain any power or anything, but he's still an option.
I mean, you throw him on an Excel circle, it's a 19k beater, and your opponent can't PG it, so if you hit triggers...
Yes, well, true, but again, I feel as though Diablo Cannon does have his advantage, but Sargo Blaze is by no means bad.
I mean, Diablo Cannon's also good because, you know, you retire him and then call him back over on an Excel circle, and he's a 26k base. So...
Yep. Always hit numbers. That's what this deck does. Now, next one is Vicious Claw Dragon Lacertorex. Lacertorex's skill is that when he's placed from hand specifically, you give him an equip gauge, and then when he's retired by any means, you Soul Blast 1 to retrieve up to 1 equip gauge equipped to him and put it into your hand. Now, the key thing about this card that is really good, he synergizes well with one of the G guards you have at your disposal, and that he triggers off of any form of retire, be it yours or your opponent. So if you're playing against a retire heavy deck and they want to clear your board, let's say for the Kagero matchup where they want to go into Ziegenberg and not burn away too much of their hand, they'll be forced to retire it and you'll gain a resource for it, as long as you can play the Soul Blast. But with some of the grade 1s we have, it can help with the resource gaining. Overall, a really good unit that we got from the V era.
Not to mention, it also combos well with Megarex in the early game. Call it behind it as your Vanguard.
Yep, does a lot of good work. And heck, if you're going first and you ride the grade 2 first, you can call out Lacertorex when you ride Megarex, get those early attacks up, and still keep hand advantage.
Yep.
Now, next grade 1 is Blackwing Dragon Raven Terra. Raven Terra has the Engorge skill and the additional skill of GB1, Soul Blast 1. When he's retired by the effect of your Vanguard with the Engorge ability, you pay the cost to recall him back to a rear guard circle, and then if you have one or less face-up counterblast, you get the countercharge. Now, this is a good effect because reviving without having to discard is a real big deal, especially with Excel circles. So, worst comes to worst, if your opponent didn't hit a trigger, he's a 17k hitter. But still, allowing reviving in the early game when you're going into your first turn stride and not going into one of your heavier hitters, it's still really good because reviving is reviving and it makes sure that you keep your advantage on field. Next is 2 Cold Dragon Freezer Nicks. Now, normally I would run more copies of him, but another grade 1 that I have at my disposal I feel as though is just as useful. But still, you'd usually draw through your deck enough to see a copy of him. Not to mention you can keep looping him with the Resurrection effect of Gaia. His skill is that when he's retired by one of your units, you have a Gaia Vanguard, you countercharge, soul charge, and then choose one of your units to give plus 2,002 until the end of the turn. This guy is your main resource gainer, so in case you're blowing through a lot of soul with Deathrex or Raven Terra, or you feel like you're using a few too many counterblasts with Megarex, this guy can help you gain it back. Next grade 1 is Winged Dragon Sky Tarot. Winged Dragon Sky Tarot has the effect of when it's retired during your turn, you counterblast 1 and add it back to your hand. Again, another card that combos very well with the Engorge grade 2s and Megarex, because after he attacks, you just simply eat him with one of their skills, counterblast 1, add him back to hand, so you have a 10k shield or to call him again during the next turn. Solid unit, very much worth running. Again, if you feel as though you want to take him down for more copies of Freezer Nicks or Raven Terra, by all means it's an option, but the amount of early game this guy manages to give Tachikaze is definitely something to consider. Next up, since I run 8 grade 3s, I'm only running 3 Stride Fodder Prism Bird. His effect is very obvious. When he's placed from hand, you reveal a grade 3 in your hand, and then search your deck for any Gaia grade 3, add it to your hand, and then discard a card. And then when paying the cost for stride, he counts as a grade 3. Now, with the amount of draw that this deck has, it does allow you to more or less be fine with paying the cost in case you only have Deathrex in your hand and you need Gaia for the later game. And, this is a more stride-based deck, so striding is important. Overall, still a really good card even after all this time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you're not striding in Premium, you're losing out on a lot of tempo.
Yep, especially with the Gaia strides we're going to be talking about in a second. Now, for the trigger lineup, I run 6 of the old triggers from the G era, but that's more because of their utility more than their power. For example, this one, Cannon Fire Dragon Paras Launcher. He's the Gaia critical trigger that all G-Era bosses got. Essentially, when your Gaia Vanguard attacks, shove him into Soul, you draw a card, and the Vanguard gets plus 5,000 until the end of the battle. Again, a way to add Soul to feed the effects of Raven Terra and Deathrex. A way to generate more resources and hit for a little more power and force more cards out of your hand. Out of your opponent's hand, that is. Very simple.
Yeah, Soul can be sparse at times with this deck.
But if you manage your resources right with Freezer Nicks, this guy, and the other card we're going to talk about, it shouldn't be any problem. Next is Archbird, the retrain of the original Grade 1 Perfect Guard for the V era. He's the draw PG that we got, and draw PGs are pretty strong right now because they open up Grade 1 space for more combo tools. Overall, being a 10k power gainer and generating resources even if it gets damage checked, really good.
And really, the only downside, if you can even call it that, a downside, is the fact that they're grade 0. So anything with grade 0 guard restrict can prevent them from being used. But really, there's not that much floating around at the moment.
Yeah, it's like the worst is Ichikishima, and isn't there a DI unit that prevents zeros?
It's it's a rear guard that gets 10k and you can't guard it with zeros.
Oh yeah, that's right, Baleful Repressor.
Yeah, Baleful Repressor.
Alright, and then the next triggers 2 of the V-era heals and 2 of the G-era effect heals. Now, I know people either like to go 4 of the effect heals or 4 of the new heals because 20k base shield and effect to gain resources. Basically, when you discard this card for the cost of a G Guardian, you can bind this card along with another heal. It doesn't have to specifically be a same copy of it, and then you could countercharge and soul charge. Again, the utility of these cards is really good. Sometimes in the early game, you might be forced to discard one of these guys in case you're trying to block V-era Overlord from rushing you too hard, or maybe something cheeky like Dimension Police is trying to hit you for a huge number. So it's so it's very good to have that 20 base heal just in case. And this guy, although situational, it does gain you resources, mainly soul, because you got a lot of counter charge options in this deck.
Yeah, you do.
And then, last in the trigger lineup, 4 V-era crits. Very self-explanatory, 10k gainers, 15k shield, forcing crit pressure, always good. And now for the Stride lineup. We start off with 4 Great Emperor Dragon Gaia Dynast. Now, Gaia Dynast is Gaia with the Engorge skill, so a bit of a spoiler warning, all the strides in this G zone are Gaia related, so even if you have to ride Tyrant Deathrex first and then Stride first, you still have your Gaia name for all your Gaia shenanigans.
That's something that should be noted in the premium format. There are a significant amount of strides that share the name of their main striders, so you can take advantage of the strider support while also using the newer stuff mixed in without necessarily needing to rely on the grade 3. But of course, in this case, Gaia is just such a good ability that it warrants running him over something like Gigarex, because Gigarex doesn't really do anything.
Gigarex he's good in standard, not in premium. He is very much non-synergistic with what this deck is trying to do.
He literally has 0 effects. I mean, I know the reason you run Deathrex is because at least he has an ability on Rearguard Circle. So that's one of the major caveats with Premium is you want to run a backup grade 3 that's good on both Vanguard and Rearguard. So.
Yep, that he is. And now back to the Stride. He has the Engorge skill. Again, very important for the Strides. A GB3 effect that when a unit is retired, you can counterblast 1, revive it, and then give it plus 3,000. Usually you don't use this skill often, but when it does matter, if you're trying to rush for game and you have open Excel circles, again, really good. And then the main skill, choose one of your units and retire it, and then you retire all units in the same column as that unit. This gets by resist, so anything that your opponent's doing that's real cheeky, let's say they have a full column with resist thinking they can get away with your retire effects, you just slap this down, knock it out, and it even countercharges for you while doing so. This is also a good way to proc resurrection effects, because you have to eat something first to activate the engorge effect in order to activate this first. So you eat one of your units that has a resurrection effect, res him, kill your other unit in the other column, and then resurrect that one.
Don't you also draw a card? Or am I thinking of the other?
No, you're thinking of the other. This one's more resource gaining and counterblast sense.
Right.
Again, very good guy. Next is your other first turn. Could be your other first stride option, that is. New Destruction Emperor Gaia Devastate. He's very good, was released in the last wave of support for the GR for Tachikaze, so understandably, he's pretty powerful.
Yeah, this guy's your advantage engine.
He has the Engorge skill, and then a Counterblast 1, and
Persona Flip.
Yeah, and Persona Flip, which, oh yeah, something I forgot to mention with Dynast, he does have the Persona Flip. For every card in your G zone, you get to choose 2 units on both sides of the field and retire the units on the circle for them. You draw a card, and then if you retired up to 3 units with this effect, you gain a critical, 10,000 power, and a drive check, which is stupid good. If you G-guard first and then go into this guy, you can instantly hit the threshold, and in case your opponent is playing something like Grand Blue where they don't want to call too many units back, well, it doesn't matter. You could just retire your own stuff and then get the full effect off. And not to mention, circle targeting, again, gets around resist, which is really, really good.
Yep. Also gets around lock because it specifies cards, not just units.
Yep. Which, while lock isn't that much of a problem right now, it's going to be a problem soon enough once we get the V-Era support.
I was going to say, right now it's not seeing a lot of play, but once V-Booster 4 drops, oh boy.
Now for the big boy. Absolute Ruler Gluttony Dogma.
That's not a Gaia.
Shut your face. You're usually going into this guy when you want to kill him, when you want to kill your opponent. This guy used to be ungodly expensive, but thanks to his reprint, he's now no more than $4 if you want to go for it. He has the Engorge skill and a GB2 skill of flip a copy of him. When you when he attacks, you retire any number of units. If you retire 3 units, he gets plus 10,000. If you retire 5 units, he gains the skill of at the end of the battle, restand with drive -1. This is an incredibly powerful stride that once you have the resources to do it, your opponent will either be left incredibly crippled hand-wise or they'll just be dead. And with it being 36k on its next attack, it's going to be hitting just as hard with Twin Drive, so the possibility for trigger checking is really strong.
And combined with a lot of your cards that either call themselves back or with Gaia's skill to call things back that get retired, he's really not a minus. And if anything, that those synergize to generate more attacks. So it's not just like, oh, I'm going -3 to get a Vanguard restand at plus 10k. No, you're basically resetting your whole field and getting a Vanguard restand.
Yep.
If you play the deck correctly.
And if you have 1 or God forbid even 2 Excel circles, oh boy, it can be a complete blowout for the opponent.
Oh yeah, and 5 drive checks.
Yeah. Yeah, this was like released with the first wave of G-Era support for Tachikaze, so they had to give him something crazy, like with what Nubatama and Spike Brothers got in Reckless Rampage.
Yeah.
Now for the G Guardians, I only run 4. If you want to change things around for the strides, maybe you want to take out 2 Gluttony Dogma to add in a 5th G Guardian and another utility stride like the GB8. I mean, all up to you, but I find this to be very comfortable. First is Iron Armored Chancellor Dimorph Phalanx. Very simple skill when he's placed on the Guardian Circle. If you have less rear guards than your opponent, gain 5,000 shield. The first G Guardian for Tachikaze, simple, strong, but he's usually a flip target for one we're going to talk about later. Second G Guardian is 2 copies of Cliff Authority Retainer Blockade Ganga. Ganga has a skill of choose one of your rear guards and retire it. When it's placed on the Guardian Circle, you gain 10,000 shield, and then you get to choose 2 of your units and give them the ability that when they are retired, they return to your hand. Now, this is useful in a myriad of ways. You could be fighting against a retire matchup. They attack with a rear guard first. You instantly drop this, so you make any retiring very much bad for them because you're keeping your resources.
It turns them into a break-even.
Yep, he combos well with Deathrex because Deathrex has to be retired by any means to get the effect off. So
last rate, don't care.
Yep. And not to mention, you could give this effect to 2 of your grade 2 rear guards, put them to the Guardian Circle, and since Guardian units are retired at the end of the battle, they bounce back to your hand.
You can guard twice.
Yep.
So nice you can guard twice.
Yep, I mean, hell, you drop this at the second to last attack of the opponent's turn, then you instantly guard with those 2 units. You have more hand to, in case you want to go into Gluttony Dogma.
Yep.
So really good G-Guard that only got better over time. And now for the last G-Guardian, Barrage Giant Cannon Bullish Primer. Bullish Primer is another G-Guardian that just got better with this clan getting Excel. He has the skill of Flip a G-Guardian, which you'll usually flip Dimorph Phalanx for it. And for every one of your open rearguard circles, this unit gets plus 5,000 for each of them. Now keep in mind, since Excel circles are a thing that count as rearguard circles, that's additional shield. Even if you have just one, and let's say your opponent just completely blew up your board, that's plus 30k shield. That is a 55 shielder by itself.
You mean 45?
45? Oh yeah, 45. I am bad at math.
It's okay. What do you be good at math? This is Vanguard. All I care about is triggers.
Says you. But still, really powerful G-Guardian. Very much worth running. And that is it for the Stride Zone and the main deck.
Anything you want to touch on about matchups or tactics and stuff like that? Or
well, in terms for matchups, this deck has a lot of potential early game if you get into your right combo pieces. You don't want to go in too early if you go first, because often you won't have the soul to pay for Deathrex, or you might be forced to ride Gigant Flame when your opponent doesn't have any units to attack, rearguard units that is. But if you can make it work, it can offer a whole bunch of early game, a whole bunch of devastating numbers, and with the resource gaining you have from this early game rush, you can usually break even on most of the costs and still have enough hand to go with a lot of power and defend yourself when your opponent rides the grade 3.
what would you say is like your worst matchup with this deck?
Worst matchup is really any deck that can go more aggressive than this one, like heavy Aqua Force variants, Blaster OTK, such like that. Murakumo and Spike Brothers, those are, especially with Spike Brothers being forced, that makes things a bit harder. But overall, other than matchups that can rush harder than you, this deck does counter a lot of those turtle decks that just like to sit on their ass, do nothing but protect themselves. It forces a lot of cards out of their hands and can generally end the game by second stride for you if you choose to either go into Gluttony Dogma or Devastate, because the ceiling for their attack power is just insane.
Alright, anything else you want to add?
Well, one thing I would like to add that, again, unless you're deciding to SP out this deck is relatively cheap. I believe you could build this for $60 at most. I mean, that's much cheaper in comparison to stuff like the aforementioned Blaster OTK, where more of the money is in the G zone.
Yeah.
Because Gancelot Saber is...
He's like $20. It's not terrible, but still.
But you do run at least 2 of him. Yeah. So that's like $40 right there.
Plus you also need Ultimo, which is like $100.
Yeah. Thankfully, you don't really run Drachma in this deck. You could do it if you really want to style on your opponent, but really, before the reprint, this guy used to be the most expensive for like $30 a pop after the first month or so of him being released from Reckless Rampage. Thank God I managed to get my 4 copies when he was only $10 at release.
Yeah. That's what happens when you have a really, really good card in a very low print run set.
Yeah, that was a ridiculous time, especially for the people who were looking forward to New Batama at the time, and they just bought out the set like crazy.
Mm-hmm. All right, man. Well, appreciate you doing the deck tech for me. The deck looks sweet. Hopefully we can get some good games on camera. Folks, leave any comments in the comment section down below, and if you got any questions for Anthony here, I'll be sure to get them along and hopefully answer them for you. And until next time, guys, I will catch you later.